Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show. It's brought to you by West Yorkshire Electrical. Dan here with Michael and with Phil Hay. Solar panels, roofs. Roofs?
I've got both of them.
Yeah.
Quite a big deal, aren't I?
I'm glad you've got a roof to go with your solar panels. Solar panels without a roof would be quite a challenge, wouldn't it? Unless obviously you put them in the fields, glorious fields of Haribo Fields of Pontefract.
In my many acres of land.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're just on the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're on the roof.
Connected to anything?
Yeah. All like electrical stuff, I believe is what the term is. The grid.
Yeah.
And also the house electrics, I presume.
Yeah. Who installed them? Did you do that yourself, or did you turn it over to the experts? A fully accredited electrician, for example.
Well, the solar panels were there when I moved in fairness, but they did. West Yorkshire Electrical did install my car charger.
Good stuff.
And they did a very nice job of it.
One of them, are you, the Wokarati?
That's me.
WY Electrical.
My vegan car charger.
WY Electrical.
I don't know if it is vegan, by the way.
Okay.
Just to,
so we don't want to put that claim.
Put that out there.
No. WYelectrical.co.uk for details. Fully accredited electrician. You know what an electrician does. They do all that. And roofs as well. Look them up. Phil Hay.
Hello.
Should we debrief quickly then your chat with Parag Marate, which followed in the wake of the Red Bull announcement and Leeds United's obviously failure to secure promotion at Wembley against Southampton. Timing-wise, this was good for somebody to come out and own the Red Bull story, because we were saying on one of the shows this week that there was a little bit of an information vacuum last summer in between the end of the season and then Angus Kinnear coming on one of our shows and talking about the relegation. So it was good to see Parag Marate come out and front up to this one and deal with it head on. How did you find him?
Yeah, what the 49ers said to us, or the people around them said to us right from the start, was that you're not going to hear from Marate every week. You're not going to hear from him every month. They will do isolated interviews at kind of sporadic intervals. But when he feels that there's something to speak about, then he will. And that's very much been the case for the past couple of weeks. Firstly, with the defeat at Wembley. Spoke to him about a lot of topics after that. Transfers and VARCA and stadium development and everything else. But with the Red Bull story, when we went to the club for right to reply and say to them, look, this is what we're running, checking that it's accurate if you want to provide any context or whatever else. They didn't comment at the time, didn't contest the story either, so the story ran. But then afterwards said, look, if you want to speak to Marate and ask specific questions about this, then you can, and he'll answer them. And I think you were saying last season there was a vacuum, and there definitely was. And I think there were reasons for that, partly because the takeover was pending and it was all being done, well, kind of behind closed doors. It was very leaky, but nobody was really in a position to say anything publicly. Not only last summer, if you go back over the years at Leeds, there have been times where this sort of thing hasn't really been adequately explained and people have been left in the dark, and it's made it difficult, and it hasn't helped with the public mood. And I think the club were conscious of the fact that because it was Red Bull, it was going to pose some questions. It was going to raise some concerns. As they put it, there were going to be some sensitivities about why Red Bull were getting involved, what this meant long term, further down the line. There is obviously two sides to this. The fact that they're sponsoring the shirts, which is one thing, and I suspect in the big picture with that, people will probably be most concerned about whether or not there's going to be the colour red on the shirt. I think people will be pragmatic enough to realise that financially it's the sort of deal that most championship clubs would kill for in money terms. But the other side to it was the fact that Red Bull were actually buying a minority shareholding in the club, which is a different thing altogether, and feeds into the ownership question, which obviously poses other queries about whether this is the start of the slow creep towards a full buyout or whatever else. So there was a lot to ask Marate, and he answered everything that was thrown at him.
What do you think the most important takeaway from it all was?
Well, I guess, and without wanting to second guess what people see as the priority in this, I guess him saying that it was minority shareholding and minority shareholding only, they don't have a seat on the board, and he said there was no option in the way that the 49ers had agreed an option with Radrizzani to buy the entire club at a future date. That doesn't exist with Red Bull. Very much pushing the message that this isn't going to be a Red Bull takeover and that it won't be Red Bull Leeds at some point further down the line. I think that's fine, and to an extent you have to take it at face value, but obviously things change, football changes, the industry changes. It's one of those where you have to keep an eye on it pretty closely, and I don't think the 49ers are naive to the extent where they wouldn't expect people to be a little bit sceptical about this, or potentially cynical, or to be slightly suspicious about whether this will become, in the way that it was with the 49ers and Radrizzani, an initial investment that grows and grows and grows to the point where, and I'm not saying that this will happen, and there's absolutely nothing at this point to say that it is planned on Red Bull's part, but the fact that they're involved, like Michael was talking about on the last podcast, means that you have to ask the question.
One of the points that I took out of it, and interested to get your comments on this, was when Marate touched on the idea of keeping a player or not, or signing a player or not. I can't remember the exact phrase that he used, but the point was this has a potential impact on Leeds United's financial fair play, profit and sustainability position. So what do you make of that? And do we know what the scale of this deal is in the short term?
No, we haven't got any numbers on it. It's been touted as basically the biggest EFL sponsorship deal that there's ever been. And I think without knowing the numbers, you can safely assume that will be true. As I say, taking Red Bull out of the equation, I would think that the level this is at is the sort of level that any other championship club would be very, very happy to take. And of course, obviously there will be money paid for the stake in the club itself, but there's always a limit to the amount of cash that an individual investor or a board as a whole can invest in players and salaries in any one season. There are tight limits because of PSR. But shirt sponsorship is different. That comes into your coffers, that gives you cash to spend. So a big sponsorship deal certainly does help when it comes to rebuilding the squad this summer, given that it's not a secret that they're going to have to sell players. Marati said that himself in the first interview that he did with us, that there will have to be players moving out. But money coming in obviously helps in that respect. And as time goes on in the championship, the more seasons you spend here, the harder it becomes to comply with PSR while being extremely competitive. So I think you sort of look at this in two ways. From the pragmatist perspective, it's got to be a very, very good sponsorship deal and commercial deal in numerical terms. But on the other hand, because it's Red Bull and because of what you have seen go on at other Red Bull clubs, particularly Salzburg, if you are concerned about it, then I totally understand why. And you'd also have to say it's a pretty different MO to what they usually do, Red Bull. They do usually acquire clubs. They usually come in and buy clubs outright as opposed to taking a minority stake. But as we were saying on last week's podcast, I think Leeds are a much more difficult club to come in and start throwing your weight around at than, say, a lower league club in Austria.
I think the market in England is difficult for them. I was trying to think of a club that has got the potential scale that they might want and would also be accepting of this. And MK Dons was about the only one I could come up with where you'd be like, well, that sort of makes sense for them. They've got a stadium, they've got a big population base, they're already a sort of a franchised team anyway.
Are you thinking of like the analogue of like Leipzig there?
Yeah, I was just trying to think of a way of like how this is different and whether or not they had other options and whether or not they've bought Leeds with an eye on just doing it anyway. Or
They haven't bought Leeds yet.
Correct. They've bought into Leeds.
Yeah.
With an eye on doing it, sorry. Although there are clearly no provisions in there for such a thing.
You're right, though. Like, if to take MK Dons as an example, that is exactly the sort of club that you could have kind of targeted to completely rebrand and, inject with whatever it is you inject them with and try and turn them into a Premier League club. But, of course, if Leeds go up next season, there are serious discussions at sort of FIFA level about Premier League games being played in the States, official Premier League games, which means that if you're sponsored one of those clubs, you get the exposure over there. And the American market just seems to be where the money is, on the basis that the Copa America's there and then the World Cup and this new Club World Cup next year as well. Like, FIFA just seem to be milking that market massively. Leeds will be on telly a lot next season again. There's part of me that sort of thinks, do Red Bull really need that advertising? They're everywhere anyway, which was the sort of thought in my head. And Red Bull haven't actually said anything about this beyond, the press release and what was in there.
Well, the counter argument there, Phil, is that you don't see Coca-Cola stopping advertising, do you, for example?
No, you definitely don't. So that, and also it becomes a bit like resting on your laurels, doesn't it? Thinking, we're big enough, it doesn't matter, and always looking to expand. I mean, given that Red Bull have a big multi-club model, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to me if they didn't want to get into the Premier League. It's just the richest division. It's where the money is. It's where all the attention is. It's where the TV rights are at the biggest. It's almost a surprise that to this point they haven't tried to muscle in anywhere. And this is very much a first step for them.
All right, then, to flip the question on its head, and approach it from the other angle, because, you know, us legacy fans are probably right to be worried about the track record with Salzburg and all that. What about this as an opportunity? Have we got cause to be excited here as well? Because there will be a number of people who will watch this, listen to this, who will say, well, I'm looking forward to it, because they're going to put a lot of money into Leeds United, and it could kick us onto that next level and make us good again. So what have we got to be excited about rather than worried about?
And fair enough, and it's a view, and as we were chatting about previously, there is an element of if you can't beat them, join them. You know, like Premier League AGM's just taking place, and you know they weren't able to
in Harrogate, no less.
Yeah, just up the road. And you know there was a discussion about, as an example, you know, should clubs be banned or at least restricted more from doing deals like selling their own training ground or stadium or hotels, in Chelsea's case, to basically themselves or sister companies or the companies that own them, in order to comply with PSR. And you would think that the answer would be, yeah, there should be more restrictions, but in the end, it didn't get any support. And I think it was down to the wording of the way the proposed changes had been set out. But even so, you know, you've got City now challenging this associated party transactions, which basically, again, restrict the size of sponsorship deals you can do with companies who, you know, are kind of separate from your owners, but basically aren't. And again, if they win that probably means that in the case of Etihad, for example, they can pull in far more cash. So everybody needs to find money if you're going to be competitive. And Red Bull are very, very rich, wealthy organisation, massive multinational. I think, were it not for the track record of what's gone on elsewhere, people would look at this and say, this is a fantastic deal. And anybody who is sitting out there saying it's good to have this money isn't wrong. It definitely is good to have this money, and it might make a big difference. And Red Bull money could make a big difference going forward. I sort of feel like if there isn't a creep onto the turf that Red Bull should be keeping away from, i.e., you know, the badge, the colour of the shirt, the name of the stadium, all that sort of stuff. And Marathi said all of that was off the table. You know, there was absolutely no discussion to be had. And as he put it, Red Bull didn't actually want a discussion about any of that. If none of that happens, then this could really, really help the club and could do good things for them. But it's just important, I think, in the meantime, to always keep your eye on that sort of thing.
Just to continue on the thread of sort of the positive aspects of this in terms of like exposure and brand strength and all that kind of exciting stuff, Phil, and with the greatest respect to Boxed and with the greatest respect to Flamingo Land, it's levels up, isn't it? And you wonder...
Oh, it's miles above, yeah.
What happens with the sleeve sponsor, for example?
Good question. I mean, obviously there has been a little bit of talk about what Red Bull will do with the logo and how it'll look. And I think if I was them, I'd be kind of savvy and think, firstly, if you don't stick red on it, you probably sell more shirts. But also it's a way of just avoiding aggravating people. But then again, commercially, they're, you know, very, very aggressive. So they'll do whatever. I'm struggling
to care that much about it. I'd rather not have red on the shirt, but, you know, equally it's been there before.
I was going to say it has happened before. I mean, it's not for me to say on that really one way or the other, but people will have their opinions. And I guess there's an argument, and this is probably true, that the higher calibre or the more high profile the sponsor on the front of your shirt, the more high profile other sponsors are likely to become. And there was never any doubt when the 49ers came in that they were going to try hard to drive Leeds, as you know, forward commercially as much as they possibly could, and that's what they're doing. I mean, interestingly, and this isn't a surprise, Marathi was saying that there is quite a significant uplift with the deal as well when they get promoted, if they get promoted.
When? You said when?
Yeah, I said when.
That means it's happening, Phil.
Just cut that and say if. But it will be worth a lot more, and given the SBO top was, you know, something in the region of 6-7 million a year, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Red Bull was in excess of that. So it is a good deal financially. Yeah.
That is a point, actually, just to quickly address, I suppose. Do you both feel like there's a certain amount of when baked into this upcoming season, that there is almost an expectation that we'll get promoted?
Well, I might have said previously, and I think this will stand up to scrutiny. I don't think a coach of a club as big as Leeds, and the same would go for Leicester, the same would go for Southampton, gets 3 shots at promotion in the Championship. I think for Farker, it's got to happen this year. And if there was to be a third attempt at it, you would imagine that would have to be on the back of going very, very close again, you know, of missing out by a fraction in the way that they did. Marathi obviously wouldn't bite on this because it doesn't make sense to say so publicly, but you know as well as I do that parachute payments drop this season. From last season, they drop even more significantly.
It's about £22 million, isn't it? You lose,
and they drop even more significantly in year 3, and after year 3, they disappear altogether. Sorry,
beg your pardon. It's £22 million of headroom you lose, don't it? It's not necessarily the parachute payments. It's what you're allowed to lose.
The parachute payments drop by
it's 10%.
Yeah. So it does fall, and then it falls again in year 3. So you have less income coming in from that front. You also have the reality of, as Leeds are going to find this summer, if you're selling players, sometimes in 2 or 3 years, you don't have the same value of assets in your squad that you did previously, so you're not able to recoup money in quite the same way. It becomes harder, basically, the longer you stay down in this division. And I think, the 49ers would have been absolutely delighted to have got promoted this season, just gone. For football reasons, but also for financial reasons as well. I think they will be 100% dead set on getting promoted this season. And I think that's part of the reason why they're sticking with Farke, is because it does give them some stability, it does give them continuity. And I think after last summer, the feeling is that they can do without having another mess through June, July, August.
I can see why people have been frustrated with Farke because of the way the season ended, and maybe some of the play did feel a little bit repetitive, and it was just, we were kind of watching this side to side thing. But if you don't have him next season, you're in the process of gambling, aren't you? In the same way as Norwich have done with, I can't remember the guy's name. They've got someone out of
from Scandinavia.
Yeah, you're into someone like that, or you go, we need a promotion specialist. In which case, it brings you back to Farke. So you might as well. I've kind of just accepted the fact. Well, I don't see a better option, and it was still on balance a good season. And the coming season, the thing that changes is there is not an excuse, because Farke had leeway at the start of the season where he was like, everyone accepted it's a nightmare for him. He's trying to deal with. He doesn't know he's going to be here. If you look at some of the early games when you've got like Pervader starting games and Gelhardt, people who didn't really feature throughout the season, you've got Drama and Gelder.
That Birmingham lineup, yeah.
And there's a whole difficulty at the start of last season, which, well, if there are difficulties at the start of this, the 49ers have only got themselves to blame for it, I think. Yeah,
no, definitely. I remember looking at that lineup at Birmingham and thinking that team doesn't get you anywhere near promotion. That I don't even think that team gets you into the playoffs realistically. And it's fine now looking back and saying, yeah, but this is how the squad ended up. But even at that point down at St Andrews, you really weren't sure what they were going to end up with at the end of the window. What was going to go on with Sinisterra, what was going to go on with Nonto, how that was all going to unravel and fix itself, if indeed it was going to fix itself at all. So it will be different this time. They've got far more time in which to deal with transfers in and out. The transfers out they need to get right as much as the transfers in. Because they need money to make sure that PSR wise they're compliant, but also to make sure that the players who go they can afford to lose in a sort of competitive sense as well. Don't leave gaping holes in the team. So no, and also it just doesn't look as strong to me, the division this year, as it did last year. I'm not pretending that I thought Ipswich would be as good as they were, but I did think Southampton would be really strong. I did think Leicester would be really strong. And, once we got out of the transfer window, I thought Leeds under Farke would be decent. I wasn't sure if they would go that close to top 2. But I would say, when the 3 who came down, Wilder with Sheffield United and then Edwards at Luton and Company at Burnley, have done it before in the division. They've all got promoted from the Championship before. So that would give them an advantage. Company's gone from Burnley, so they're going to have to get that right. Sheffield United feel like they need a lot of work and really do need to right themselves. Luton, I think, will be good. How good is really difficult to tell. But put it this way, it doesn't surprise me that Leeds are sitting at the top of the bookies' odds at the moment. I can totally see why that is.
The Square Ball Podcast.